Hi, my name is Kyle Burkholder, and this is Covenant Conversations, our attempt to have thoughtful and meaningful gospel-centered conversations around everyday issues that impact your daily life. This week, we are talking to Carissa Wott, and Carissa is not only a friend and member of Covenant Church, but a clinical psychologist and somebody who knows a lot about relationships. And what we are going to be talking about are the 3 things that wives wish their husbands knew. This is part 1 of 2. We're going to come back next time and we'll talk about 3 things that husbands wish their wives knew. But this week we'll be talking about what we think that the wives in our community wish their husbands knew. And we are going to get into a wide range of topics. So this is both for wives, so you know that you are being heard, and for husbands, get out your notes and start taking notes. It's time to talk about appetites of many types, sexual, emotional, and everything in between. And what we're going to land on, as I'm pretty excited about, a new type of intentionality and curiosity that is going to drive positive, encouraging interactions and results in every marriage. So I'm really excited about what you're about to hear, and I can't wait for you to start enacting these things in your everyday life. And so without further ado, let's get into today's conversation. Hello, welcome to Covenant Conversations. My name is Kyle Burkholder, and I'm so excited for today's conversation. I'm joined by my friend Carissa Wott. And we are going to be talking about the 3 things that wives wish their husbands knew. I'm getting it confused already because we have a plan. I'm going to spoil it here. Our plan is to come back around and flip it and do 3 things that husbands wish their wives knew. And our desire and hope today is to create some language, create some conversation, and hopefully create some communication that will bond and draw together husbands and wives. Carissa actually brought this idea to me, so I'm going to let her introduce herself. You've heard her here before, but if this is your first time, she can tell you who she is. And then Carissa, what brought this kind of concept into your brain, into your heart? Why is this our topic for the day?
Absolutely. Okay, well, first, like Kyle said, my name is Carissa. I am a wife. I am a mother. I am a member of Covenant. I am a clinical psychologist by trade. And I love people in general, and I spend most of my time talking with people and hearing areas of struggle and trying to work with people on improving just their ability to live their life and flourish and have healthy relationships, healthy minds, healthy bodies, healthy emotions. And one of the things that I hear a lot is that marriage is really hard. And there are so many places for marriages to fall into these valleys. And there are so many just pitfalls and landmines throughout the years of marriage that couples are dealing with. And, you know, I thought it could be helpful to have a conversation. One conversation where kind of the women's voice is highlighted, and one conversation where the men's voice is highlighted, to have this space where we can just listen and try to understand our partner's perspective without defensiveness, without immediately falling into the same trap of arguments that we get in the habit of having within marriages, and to just create space where we can lean into difficult conversations with a mindset of compassion and understanding and working towards connection in a marriage versus feeling like we're fighting our spouse to just be heard and to get our needs met. So that was kind of that was the background for it.
I love it. And it's so helpful because as you know, when a couple is on the couch having this conversation in front of you, to your point, it can get defensive and everybody's a little raw in that moment. And so our goal, I think, is to sort of have that conversation for them. And it's easier to listen to somebody else have the conversation, identify with parts of it, and then talk about that together. I know in my life, it's always easier for me to diagnose someone else's issues than to look inside and see my own. Is that some of the heart behind this, is helping by having it so other people can see maybe where they fit?
That's exactly it.
Okay. Well, this is going to be exciting. I'm a little nervous because I am on the wrong side of this equation at the moment. So men, if you're listening, I'm with you here. And what we need to do is learn how to listen. And so if you're on listening today, part of a great conversation is learning how to be a great listener. And so let's see if we can do it together as Carissa unpacks the first thing that wives wish their husbands knew.
Yes. Okay. So the first thing that I hear often is that wives wish their husbands, that they could feel that their husbands desire them just as much as they desire their body or sexual gratification. That when there is a discrepancy in the marriage between how actively and intentionally a man pursues his wife sexually, as compared to how often he pursues knowing his wife and connecting with her emotionally and hearing about her heart and her thoughts and her experiences. When the pursuit of sex is way up high and the pursuit of the emotional connection is a lot lower, women tend to interpret that as meaning that their body is an object for their husband's pleasure, as opposed to really experiencing sex as a way that their husband expresses their desire for them as a whole entire being. Mm. And this is complicated because then I hear men and they say, well, I am so confused by that distinction. I desire my wife. So why is there this distinction between her as a person and her body? A lot of men will say, I don't understand how she can see it that way. And so if you're okay with it, I want to give men like just a little bit of insight into how women's minds work.
Yes, because our minds don't always work that way.
Yes.
And as the confession, I've said it in front of our church multiple times when we talk about sex or anything like that. I say often my known sin in the area of sex is objectifying my wife, to which most people go, if that's the worst you could do, you're doing great. And I go, no, I feel awful because I recognize, to your point, my kids were really upset that I said it because they're like, Dad, that is awful. Don't say that again. On my worst days, I'll see my wife as a piece of meat as opposed to my partner who I'm there to serve and love and all those things. So at the same time, I can understand that about me and about men in general have this proclivity, but I don't totally understand the way she works. So that would be awesome. Can you give us a sense? How is this working? How's her brain, her heart? How is this all interconnected?
Yes. So most women have had an experience at some point in their life where at least once, if not many times, they were treated like a piece of meat. And their body was given higher value than them as a human being. It's the idea of just running down the street. If we took a poll, how many women have been whistled at or wolf called or called names when they're just out getting some exercise? And I think what happens there is so women have these experiences and then we combine them with the really difficult reality that we experience as women is that our husband's sexual desire maybe doesn't just show up for us and us alone. That sexual arousal and sexual desire for men, it's a powerful thing. And we don't necessarily have to be present physically or even in our spouse's mind for them to experience that type of desire. And so this is the reason that pornography is so rampant in the culture. And I think why pornography is so painful for women when their husbands are using that, because it divorces their sexual desire from the wife. And so when the wife says, I am not unique, I am not the unique prompting for your sexual desire, it doesn't make me feel all that special when you desire my body. It can be a great thing. We're not saying that we don't feel special at all because of that. Yeah. That's a good thing to desire the body. But when I just feel like you desire my body, that doesn't make me unique and special.
Right.
But when you communicate to me that you're curious about who I am and you're interested in my day and you would like to have a date night, or you're willing to provide me with non-sexual touch, that then allows us to feel like our husband desires us as a person. And if he desires to know us as a person, then the sexuality comes directly from that. And it says, oh, well, now he's not just pursuing sex, he's pursuing me. And sex is now wrapped up into who I am. And now it's emotional and physical intimacy together for the woman, which I think a lot of times naturally sex just happens to be emotionally and physically intimate for the man, just as it is. And this is a way to wrap that emotional piece into the woman and can actually increase her desire pretty substantially when she's no longer is a piece of meat. She's a valuable human being.
Right. Okay. So super insightful. Let me play a little on the husband side and see how this makes sense to you. Because a man's sexual appetite, if we can compare a man's sexual appetite to a normal person's, as if men are abnormal, to a normal person's appetite for food. If you hadn't eaten all day and you're starting to get hungry and you're driving down the street, everything starts to look delicious. You would never eat at Burger King, and now you would drive through and have one of everything on the menu because it's starting to look good. Cravings come up. You know, never shop on an empty stomach, that whole thing, because it just, your appetite grows. So does your desire, and your desire then begins to outpace what you can even rationally, or it overwhelms your emotional and rational senses, and you just want food. I've often compared men's sexual desires if left unchecked. And now, men, you need to listen. This is still your business to manage. This is still your self-discipline to cultivate. It's still your self-control to find. Men's sexual desires, though, happen to work a lot like our appetites for food. Whereas if we have not eaten in a while, it tends to go unchecked, and the cravings begin, and the longer looks, to your point, the woman running down the street who gets a glance when we're satisfied and full, gets a second glance when we're not, and we catch it and go, dang it, okay, how do I avoid that? The problem is for us is when we apply that in the home, it begins to become a problem because our wife can sense it. I mean, you guys, you're not dumb. You know when it's ramping up, and he doesn't want me, he just has needs. So how, if you first tell me if that rings true as accurate for how sexual desire works, maybe for everybody, but for men in particular, if that rings true with your experience, what you've heard, but then how can a man better manage that to create and cultivate intimacy to align with those desires? Because I think sometimes if we don't cultivate the intimacy, then the appetite takes over. And maybe if we did both at the same time, the appetite would take care of itself to some degree. So tell me, I said a lot of words. What does any of that land on you?
So I think the first thing I take away from that is the importance of communication. Because I think when those sexual appetites get a lot stronger, there's sometimes the wife feels a lot of pressure, and that pressure tends to be a turnoff. But if they say no, then they're met with frustration and rejection and the cold shoulder. So it's almost like the man is getting hangry. So if we're going to use that metaphor. Great. And then the woman feels rejected. And then we start to get in this cycle of pulling away from intimacy versus even being able to have a conversation that says, wow, my appetite is really increasing right now. I know that you are not a piece of meat. I know that you are just not a meal to satisfy me. What do you need to have your sexual appetite be increased? What would you like to hear from me? Do you feel like we're connected? Do you feel like I'm only interested in sex? Or do you feel like I've been showing you that I'm interested in you? And I think sometimes those are the conversations. That conversation in and of itself might just be intimacy promoting, because it's that thought of, okay, he does have this strong desire and he knows that I'm more than just a piece of meat. And if I know that, then of course I want to support my husband in his desires. Of course that is a need that he has. Why would I not want to lean towards satisfying those needs? He's putting this effort into satisfying my needs over here. Now this is this beautiful give and take of that serving and sacrificing, and it creates an opportunity for fun versus I have to perform so that he's not mad. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have things beyond, so communication being the key, if husbands and wives are listening to this together separately and they're going, how do we better cultivate intimacy then? How as a husband, what would be the advice? How do I better cultivate intimacy beyond communication, or I got to learn our love languages, or what are the things that you would go, yeah, here are some easy steps that if you're looking to almost prove to your wife, because I think most husbands would say, no, I love every bit of her. I just happen to be compartmentalizing a little too often into the zone. How do I better round that out to cultivate that intimacy with my wife, to showcase that for her?
I think the simplest thing that you can do is to be curious. And if you walk into your week saying, I would like to learn something about my wife, we think that we know our spouses. Women too. Women, we need to do this as well. But you've been married 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, right? I know my spouse. I don't even need to ask them questions. I already know what they're going to say. But if you walk into interactions and say, maybe I can learn something new. I am curious about any aspect of your spouse. That right there promotes intimacy, because it's that I'm showing you I have that desire to know you and to hear you. And that if you ask questions, so it's, how was your day? Fine, good. Okay, done with that conversation. Maybe not like that, but how was your day? Good. Tell me one interesting thing about your day. Tell me one surprising thing about your day. These are those questions that, even if the answer is a 60-second answer, that is now intimacy. That is now connection. So I think it could be as simple as, how do I be curious?
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So one of my standbys, looking at a week ahead, I'll say, what's the hardest part of the week coming up, or what are you least excited about? So I can unearth anxieties and worries.
Yeah.
I can't fix them, right, guys? How can I help? I can't. Good. I'm here for you. Also, what are you most excited about? So I can look forward with questions like that. And then looking backwards, guys, it's easy to say, what was the hardest part of your week? So it's Friday night and you've managed to carve out some time. What was the hardest part of your week? And if you get a non-answer, what about emotionally? What was the hardest part of your week? There are ways to even dig on that. And often, to Carissa's point, I think what I've experienced personally is, even if there isn't a really deep conversation that comes out of it, maybe she's exhausted and doesn't really want to talk about it right now. You get the credit for having been curious. You get the credit for having asked. She doesn't need to have the hour-long conversation. And the reason guys don't ask is I don't know if I have the energy for this right now. She probably doesn't either. She just wants to know that you're ready when the time comes. And so making that a regular point, and I would even say, if you're the kind of guy who needs to schedule stuff, schedule it. If you need to set aside time, set aside time. No woman has ever been disappointed that you scheduled time for her and made her a priority. And so do what you got to do. And I think we can cultivate intimacy and hopefully move towards a more holistic view of our wives as our partners in intimacy of all types. We feel good about that?
Absolutely. And I think if you schedule 5 minutes to start, if this is not part of it, that may be enough. That, to your point, you don't need to do an hour. If you can schedule 5 minutes a day, potentially worlds could change with that intentionality in that 5 minutes, and wives as well, to spend 5 minutes really being curious about your husband. That total of 10 minutes over the course of a day, I think, could do powerful things.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So we've solved that problem, guys. Number 2, the second thing, Carissa, what is the second thing that wives wish husbands knew?
Okay. So the second thing starts with wives wish their husbands knew how much they respect the work that they are doing outside of the home, how much they value the provision, how much they value the effort that their husbands put into work. Wives see you, and we're not always very good at communicating what we see, and that's on us, and we need to work on that. So we will own that, wives. If you're listening, we need to own that. But for the vast majority of people that I talk with, they see their husbands as capable and competent and respectable and hard workers. And that is such an incredible thing. And then we compare that person, who they are at their work, with the person who comes home. And we wish that husbands would come home with the same amount of passion that they have for their work, and that they would partner with us in the home with that same amount of interest, with that same amount of desire. And like I said, passion for home life to run just as well as work life.
So in this construction, we're making, can we say we're making some assumption that on average, a woman is managing the home by default? Most family calendars are run by a woman. Most of the kids' schedules are known by women before they're known by men. Can we make that assumption just generally?
Yeah, research supports it. Whether the woman works in the home or outside of the home, it doesn't actually matter. The research suggests that for most women, they're carrying the lion's share of the management of the home. Yeah.
Great. So then if we're going to look at it that way, let me take I don't have a specific man in mind, but let me take a man who goes, I I take care of the yard and I take the kids to t-ball and I grill out on the weekends and I'm usually helping cleaning this, that, and the other. And if he can stack up
Mhm.
some equal number of labor hours at the home, that's not enough,
Mm,
right?
right.
So you're talking about something different. So
Yes.
even if a man can stack up the same number of hours,
Yes.
it's more than that. It almost goes with the first answer where we're
Mhm.
talking about curiosity, interest,
Mhm.
involvement at a deeper level. So if I have that right, if I'm on the right trail, tell me more about that. So why is it
Absolutely.
not number of hours served? What is it really about?
Perfect question. So I'm going to use a metaphor for this. Let's say, husbands, if you are at your work and let's say you get a new coworker in and you're partnering together for whatever your work responsibility is, and that coworker comes in and they say, "Hey, I'm here, I'm invested. You tell me what needs to be done, organize how it needs to be done. And if you're telling me that I have a task, if today is Monday and the task is on Friday, I need you to give me a reminder on Thursday evening about the task that is going to come up on Friday." And if that you go through, you're like, okay, this is a new coworker. Let's do this. You give them all of that instruction and that coworker does it all. And they do all of those tasks. And you're like, okay, they're sharing the labor. You've got 50% of the tasks. I've got 50% of the tasks. But over the course of 2 months, over the course of a year, over the course of 5 years, if you are continuing to carry that responsibility for your coworker and coming in and saying every single day, this is what you need to do and this is how you do it, it doesn't feel like an equal load, even though the actual labor seems pretty equal. That coworker, my guess is you wouldn't see them as invested in the work. They're not passionate about the work. They're not taking ownership. They're doing a great job, but it's that ownership and that partnership piece that would be missing.
There's
And
a
so I think,
mental load there too, right?
yeah,
I mean, it's who has to remember. I have
yeah,
to remind you, and the danger we get into is what I hear, and I hear it a lot in my office. We get into wives feeling like they have to manage their husbands. So the office
mhm,
worker is a great example of everybody knows that two people can work the same 40-hour weeks, but if one's managing the other, that's a much heavier load. So that's a
yes.
great, I love the metaphor. Um, so how do we avoid, what are examples of this being done well? So you might even say, I would guess this is true. If a wife is primarily managing the home and the
Mhm.
relationship, she would rather a 70-30 split if the 30 was well owned
Yes.
and didn't
Yes.
require management. Is that so? So when do you see
Absolutely.
this going well? How do you see this working well? What do you see as great solutions when people come in and they go, oh, that's actually great. What does that look like? What are the best practices?
Yes. So, well, I think first thing is the wives need to be willing to step back and need to have the humility to say that my way is not the only way and maybe not the best way.
Yeah.
And to actually give husbands ownership. Because if the wife is holding the reins to everything, then we're getting in the way of our husband using their skills that they have to lead and to be capable and to set up a system that works really well for them. So one, wife has to step back. And then I think two, maybe sometimes the husband needs to come in with some humility as well and saying, maybe my wife has run this for a long time. And if she's stepping back, can I learn something from her? And maybe she does have a system that works fairly well. And can I be humble enough to kind of put myself into that system versus reworking it? Because if I'm taking over, it doesn't always have to be my way. So that's one thing, is actually giving husbands the reins to do what they can do. They're capable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have really, really capable men, and that's what we have to. That's the basis that we have to come into this discussion with. We know that they're capable and that they can do it. I think also having that conversation about what are the things that you feel like you can succeed at. There are some husbands who say, I never want to take a kid to the doctor because it's all the
Mm.
questions that I can't answer. There are some wives that say, I don't want to take the kids to the doctor because it stresses
Yeah.
me out. But to sit down and to say, what are these things? What are all of our tasks? What's the entire mental load? What are the things that we know are within your skill set and
Mm.
within your areas of strength? And maybe those are the ones that we hand off more quickly or more easily to them.
I love that. An example in my house, I say often, I cook and do dishes. That's something I do. My wife is excited to go and power wash the back patio and put on rubber boots and get muddy. She has sometimes it's just passion. She has a passion to see that area cleaned. I don't care. And part of the releasing, and this goes, like you said, women need to release some tasks and release some of the control, and men need to do the same. I have to release the idea that I usually do the outside work, but she cares about that a lot more than I do. Yeah. I'm actually going to free her up to do that. And maybe that's the day that I go, well, while you're doing that, I have to be curious enough to go, can I get this load of laundry? How do I, what are the things that I can do off of your plate? And so then it's really, guys, for us, an understanding of what's on the plate. You don't have to eat everything on the plate. 30%, 40% might be enough. If you understand what's on the plate, one, I think we can better appreciate and recognize the load that's being carried, the same way we want someone to recognize the load we carry as men, to recognize the complexity of running a home, managing children, going to the doctor's appointment, but also knowing what's on the plate allows us in moments whether someone's not feeling well or it's an especially busy week. Sometimes it's enough for us to simply take a task without even asking and have it done. And my old trick, this was not always totally honest. My old trick was I always talk about leaving vacuum lines in the carpet. Well, she vacuums. I don't vacuum. But if I knew she had a long week, I'm going to make sure I vacuum and leave lines in all the carpet so she sees it. So I get credit because that's me being petty. But or I would mop and make sure I used extra Pine Sol so it smelled especially clean when she walked in. But part of that is knowing here are things that are now off her plate. And you don't have to mop and vacuum every week. But even seasonality of that is a recognition of her weight that she carries and our way to help. And so I love the whole idea that she's managing a thing, and we as good employees, so to speak, can learn the boss's job at home and figure out how to take weight off the plate. And that makes everyone happier, which again comes back to number one, which all of a sudden he gets me, he understands me, he knows the weight I carry. Exactly. And the cycle virtuously starts to spin upwards instead of cycle downwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually what you're saying too, in leaving the carpet lines or the Pine Sol and talking about that, there's a part of me that loves that in that I want you to see that I did this for you versus I want you to give me a gold star. And that there's a little bit of a difference there. But if the husband can come and say, hey, I just want to be very clear that I did this because I intentionally wanted to take something off of your plate because I know it's a challenging week. Oh my goodness, that is intimacy promoting versus, hey, did you see that I mopped? Yeah. Look at that. Look at how good of a job I did. That feels like that pulls you away from that intimacy that you're seeking. But if it's see it, but I see it because I see you, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Leave all those carpet lines in. Yeah.
I'm all about the carpet lines. I can leave them all day. Men ask questions and you'll be better off. And that's the thing. We keep coming back to this in sermons. We keep coming, men, if you'll ask questions, she wants to tell you. If you say, what are the top 3 things in your week that feel like burdens right now? What are the top 3 things at home that feel like burdens? And if she goes, it's this, and this, and you can stomach one of them, be like, what if I took number 2 off your list? That's a huge thing. It's a way to help. It probably takes you 20 minutes. And all of a sudden, she has a partner at home, and we get to, for us as men, we get to evidence and show some of what we are capable of doing. There's nothing, you feel good when you do these things, guys. It isn't like get in line and start getting to work. You feel great when you get to support the person God has given you to go through life with. And it's gratifying for us just to feel that at home, because so rarely do we get the opportunity to really lean in like that. So guys start asking questions. And when she says, I wish I didn't have to fold this 7-year-old's laundry, you'd be like, well, guess what? You don't have to. And while you're watching Sunday Night Football or whatever you have going on, drag the laundry over there and fold it. And it's pretty easy and it'll make a huge difference. So I love this. Okay. We're solving the world's problems. Third and final thing today that wives wish their husbands knew. Hit us with it.
Yes. Okay. Wives wish their husbands knew how important their acknowledgement, their praise, these overt expressions of love, which can be sex, but absolutely does not just have to be sex, but how important that is to us as women, that your wife craves your acknowledgement more than anybody else's in the entire world. And we talked in a previous podcast, but I'll just give just a brief moment of kind of a flashback to that. Women are carrying around a ridiculous amount of insecurity inside their heads at all times. And husbands, it is not at all your job to get rid of that insecurity. That is not your job. You can't do it. We're not asking you to do it. But in that darkness that lies within your wife's mind, when you come in and tell her that you love her, that you see her, that you desire to know her, that's like a candle that just shines in the light. And no, it's not going to eliminate the darkness of insecurity. That's not your job. But maybe what your job is to reflect Christ's love for your wife. And if you can reflect even just a tiny bit of how much Christ loves your wife, if you can reflect that back to her, I don't know that there's much else in this world that is more powerful than that. If you have children, if you can reflect Christ's love to your children in that way, the ripple effect is profound. And that kind of allows, I think it sets that foundation where your wife knows that God loves her. Your wife knows that you love her. That is a solid foundation for her to go out and tackle the world and figure out her own insecurities, and figure out how she, can fall into her purpose, because there's a safe foundation. There's a home base to come back to that she's not questioning, that she's not doubting. It is secure and it is safe and it is so powerful. And we desire that deeply from our husbands.
Talk about the trap, maybe, because that's a powerful sentiment. And the trap for us as husbands is we're reactive, usually in this world, when it comes to emotional acknowledgement or that reiteration of our love. We're usually waiting until it looks like it's really needed. Yeah. So you come home and she's crying on the couch quietly and you don't know what happened. And so you show up, and as a man, you start to, no, you're great and everything's fine. And we talked about that. Don't tell her it's fine when it's not fine. Right. So the trap for us is we're only doing it reactively, which is not the worst to at least, respond to your wife's mood. But you're talking more about a proactive, I don't even want to say like a method, but a proactivity that addresses our wife before she's at the bottom of the barrel looking for some hope to get out. Is that true, first? And then second, what's the difference that we need to understand as men so we know how one matters so much differently than the other?
Well, those are really good questions. Can we go back and even use your metaphor for men with their sexual appetites in the meals?
Absolutely.
Let's frame it in that language. So if we as wives, if we say we're going to only wait till our husbands are starving, and that's the only time that we're going to lean into taking care of that particular appetite, that doesn't feel like enough, right? So just like hunger, we need regular meals. We need that regular connection physically, emotionally. I think here it's that idea where if you view it as, again, maybe that your wife has this hunger that's not only yours to fill. Again, I don't want to overstate it and put this all on husbands as their responsibility, because that's not fair. That's not what we're asking. But to say that there is this hunger, and my wife does need regular meals. And if I've told her, that I think that she's intelligent, one time I've told her 1,000 times, shouldn't that be enough? And we say, no. It's if you have children, well, I told you that I loved you this morning, so do I need to tell you that I love you again for the next week? Of course you do. Maybe we tell them 50 times during a day that they are loved. And that doesn't feel like a burden for our children to say that and to give them a hug and to look at them and say, gosh, you are funny. You make me laugh. To approach, spouses in the same way, not that, oh my gosh, this is this unfillable bucket that I'm never going to I will never fill. I don't feel successful, so I don't even want to tackle it. But this idea that it's not a burden to communicate my love to my spouse or my interest in my spouse. It's easy and it's life-giving and it's life-fulfilling. Maybe not life-fulfilling, but it's fulfilling. That's what I meant to say. As opposed to it's this major task. But maybe if you walk into the day saying, can I communicate 5 different ways to my wife that she is loved today? Again, powerful. And how much emotional intimacy does that promote? And then again, we're creating this cycle of she feels emotionally connected. And then the physical connection comes from that. And then when we get that good physical connection, that often men are like, oh yeah, like that feels good. I want to be more emotionally connected. And we start to have this beautiful cycle of connection as opposed to this disconnection that's in every area of the day.
Right.
I don't know if that was specific enough or even addressed your first question, because I think I lost it.
No, super helpful, actually, super helpful. And especially the part of like the idea that I would go into a day with the intentionality 5. It's great because if there's a man listening to this, I have a hunch, and you can elbow your wife if you're listening together. I have a hunch that if you told a man you need to come up with 5 ways to be an emotional encouragement to your spouse today, most would kind of like start getting a minor headache and go, okay, so I got to put a spreadsheet together and figure it out. And then they can't all be the same. It can't be 5 texts because that's going to start feeling empty. So I got to write a handwritten note, send some flowers, send a text, public post on Facebook. And so the man begins to come, he gets overwhelmed thinking, I don't know how I'm possibly going to do this. And yet what I would suggest to men is just the intentionality and the effort having to think of that is going to change the whole way you approach the day. And so it isn't about getting an A+ on the scorecard. It's about, did I go into the day with wife at top of mind? And so you're going to do it for your boss. You're going to do it for your clients. You're going to do it for the things that are in front of you. And so we have to get out of the mindset of being firefighters. And men often look at their family like firefighters, and we'll address whatever's urgent and wherever the crisis is. And so, but if we can be planners, and I don't know what the difference between a firefighter and some other planner is, but we need to plan and avoid, like the fire inspector comes and make sure that your extinguisher is working and you're not over capacity in your building and whatever. Yeah. We have to start doing that sort of work. And to your point, I think the intimacy and the benefit, we're not doing it for the benefit, we're doing it out of love, but the benefits will arrive out of intentionality. How we do that, you'll learn and get better as you go. With all other things, just get started. Would that be start small, start with 1 a day, yes. Every day at noon, text your wife, and then build.
And start simple. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be a huge text. It can be, oh, I had to go, I went to the grocery store and I was picking up burgers. And so I got your favorite snack. Here you go. Yep. It can be those moments where you walk by and you just put your hand on her shoulder and you walk by and you just say, I love you, and then leave. So don't overcomplicate it. It can be so small. It can be looking over in the car and saying, ooh, that move that I just made when I was driving, that made you nervous, didn't it? Okay, I see you. It can be that small. Yeah. So it can be as big as you want it to be, but make it simple. Those simple things are beautiful and they're more than enough.
Awesome. Men, build habits. If you have habitual things you do during the day, every man's work life looks different. Some of you work weird hours, but think about your day. One thing that it took me forever to figure this out. When I'm between appointments, often I have to drive from one place to the next. And we don't live in a very big place, right? And so sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10 at the most. And it took me years and years and years to realize that's the time to check in. I have nothing else to do. So I can either, guys, listen to a podcast about basketball or something else I'm selfishly interested in. Or before I start that, I did it today. I made a phone call. I went to voicemail. I left the voicemail. I hung up. My podcast started and I finished my 10-minute drive from one appointment to the other. But the text I got back was, thank you so much for thinking of me. I was in a meeting, but it means a lot. And there was a yellow heart. And I don't know what a yellow heart means compared to a red heart. So I'm going to have to ask some questions when I get home. But guys, if you can create those spots in your day that just click, this is my wife's spot. I think of her every time I transition from this workspace to this workspace or whenever I finish this meeting. Even those things, she doesn't think of it that way. She's not going, I bet he just got out of a meeting. She says, I bet he's thinking of me. and it will change everything. So if that's any encouragement, Carissa, how do we avoid, I don't want to talk about enabling, but how do we avoid, you mentioned codependency or the unfillable bucket that isn't ours to fill. Is there any trap for men to avoid when it comes to leaning in on this? Or is it just, we just need to be faithful to do what we're supposed to do and she's got to work that out?
I think it's just be faithful to do what you've got to do. Because we don't want to fall into the trap of men taking ownership for things that the wife needs to be in ownership of. Because it is not your job to make us healthy. It is not your job to fix all of our problems. It is not your job to get rid of our unhelpful thoughts. We simply ask that you love us and sometimes give us the responsibility to do what we need to do. Yeah.
Okay. If we were summarizing today, if we're coming to a close and we were summarizing, the word that keeps coming up in my head is intentionality. And it seems like that's landing in every phase of life. If women, could I say it this way? One thing wives wish their husbands were more intentional with the way they loved us. Would that be an accurate summary? And what would you add to that? How can you flesh that out so we get that takeaway as husbands to go, it really is as simple as be intentional. What does that look like?
I love that word. I love that intentionality. And I think, I think it can look so different for each man. I think curiosity shows intentionality because you're opening yourself up. You're saying, if I have to be intentional about it, if I'm being curious and trying to understand. So that would be maybe my second word to go along with that intentionality. I think in the communication, that's for all relationships, that's where it can break down. That's where relationships flourish. But if I as a wife see my husband coming to me intentionally and saying, I'm at least going to ask you a question. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I don't know how to approach this, but I at least want to come to you and ask. Asking what your wife needs, wants, could have help with, that shows that intentionality, that shows that curiosity, that shows that investment. So you don't have to mind read. You don't have to guess. You don't have to agree to do something that's not within your wheelhouse. But if I ask, or if you ask, and even if we say, well, this is what I need, and you're like, well, I cannot do that. You know what? That's okay. Because at least you asked, and at least you now know and you see me. And then sometimes it's like, oh, good. Well, I'm going to go solve that problem on my own. But thank you for listening. And thank you for seeing me in it. And I don't need you. And that's a great space for a wife to be in, to be able to say, you did your part. Thank you for showing up. See you later. So I don't want men to feel like this is an overwhelming task. And that if I ask, oh my gosh, it's like hours of my day and I just don't want to do that. I think if you come in with the intentionality, the actual work is not going to be that great. Like, it's not going to be a huge burden. It's not going to be very much.
That's beautiful. I love the curiosity bit. That is it. It's curiosity. We are naturally curious about a lot of things, and to cultivate curiosity in our spouse will only lead to great things. She's not a mystery, although often to us she is. She's not a mystery to be solved. She is a partner to be learned and loved. So, Carissa, this was incredible. This was so much fun. I've learned a ton. I'm hoping that our wives have felt heard and that our husbands have been listening. We are going to come back and do this all again, and we're going to flip the script and talk about 3 things that husbands wish their wives knew. And I cannot wait to have this conversation with you on that. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being willing to share your wisdom, your insight, and lead us on this journey. And what else? Is there any final thing you want to say, or are you just ready to get on to part 2?
Let's do part 2, Mike. I'm excited to hear from husbands and to hear their perspective and to listen and learn and grow. I think it's going to be awesome.
Oh boy, buckle up. Okay, well, everybody, thank you for listening. Thanks for being part of this conversation. Feel free to share this as widely as you want. We are doing this for Covenant Church and our little tiny map community in Bowling Green, but as it blesses you, it blesses us to know that this is in some small way impacting marriages. So thanks for being part of the conversation, and we will see you next time right back here.